Well, hello everybody. Welcome to our WhisperClaims app showcase webinar series. Thank you so much, XU, for having us today. I'm Suze. I'll be the host for this part of the session, and on our panel today is Mike Dean, co-founder and MD of WhisperClaims, and Steve Leonard from Windows Accountants.
Hi.
Hi to you both. So we've done a few of these sessions so far, and it's usually just Mike and myself. So today we are truly delighted to be joined by one of our customers, Steve, really so that you don't just have to take it from us about how fantastic WhisperClaims software and advice line is. You can hear it from Steve. He will be talking about his first-hand experiences a bit later on and sharing lots of insights and advice for you all. Our aim for the session today is for you to leave here feeling empowered and confident to either your new R&D tax service in-house or to power up your existing service by implementing WhisperClaims into your business. As many of you will be aware, there is a huge shake-up of the scheme about to happen, and we want to demonstrate how technology with the right support can offer you a structured framework to keep you up to date and compliant during this wave of change. Just some housekeeping from us, I suppose. We do have the Q&A box, which somebody's already been very keen and started to use, so that's fantastic. Please do feel free to start firing your questions into the Q&A box, and we will be monitoring that, and if there's something that comes up that's really pertinent to what we're speaking about, we will try and include them and answer them as we go along. And also do feel free to use the chat box to talk to us in the audience as well. I will be using the chat box to post links with stuff that Mike's going to be referring to, and also some calls to action that we'll talk about a bit later on. But just remember, somebody else is probably wanting to ask the same question as you, so don't be shy. Please do get those questions into the Q&A, because we'll be really happy to answer them a bit later on. So to kick us off, Mike is going to be doing a quick intro about us here at WhisperClaims, who we are, why we do what we do, and the impact that we have had on the R&D tax space to date. We will also be talking to Steve in between that time, as I said, hearing about his experiences with us and getting some insights into things that are going on in the sector just now. We'll then have a look at the app, talk about pricing support, and leave enough time for a Q&A at the end for you all to have your say as well. So over to you, Mike and Steve.
Brilliant. Thank you, Suze.
Next slide across, sorry.
Right.
There you go.
Brilliant. So not just tech, but what I wanted to say to this initially is actually what we're not as a business. So we're not consultants. We don't work with end user companies. We don't work direct with SMEs. What we've built is a technology solution that's specifically for accountants, and we've wrapped services and support around that to make sure that we give you the confidence to deliver a service under your own brand to your own clients. So that's a combination of award-winning software, and I'll talk a little bit about the awards in a minute, and then a bunch of learning tools. So that's webinars, training courses, help that's been built into the app itself, along with a WhatsApp community as well. So we've got a community of users who share information with each other as well. We might talk about that a little bit more later on. But a real kind of key pillar of our support is our advice line. So our team of experts are there for our customers to lean on whenever they need to in terms of scheme and eligibility advice. And we find that that's kind of one of the key drivers actually for people working with us. Do you want to go to the next slide, Suze? Thank you. So over on the right-hand side there, I mentioned our awards. Just really quick, I'm not going to kind of work through them one by one, but our awards are a combination of software-related and accounting sector-related, which I guess is the thing that we're most proud of. It's the fact that on the one hand, the software sector has recognised that what we've done has been technically difficult. And then on the other hand, the accounting community has recognised that what we've done has been incredibly useful for accountants in entering into this market. So it's great to have that kind of combination of recognition. Now, over on the left-hand side of this slide is just a little bit of an overview of where we've got to date. So we launched in September 2018, so about 4.5 years ago. Currently working with over 160 firms nationally. And across them, we've done, well, it's getting towards 3,000 claims now. And actually on an annual run rate, that's put us roughly running at about the same level as some of the big name R&D tax consultants in terms of volume. So again, something we're proud of is the fact that we've kind of enabled these accountancy firms to essentially compete head to head with some of the big name consultancies, which is great to see. So those claims represent about 400 million of eligible spend, which is over 100 million of tax benefit to the clients of our users. So if you think of that in terms of the impact that our tech is having on the SMEs out there, innovative SMEs out there, again, something we're really proud of. Now, underneath these numbers, probably just worth talking about kind of average sizes of claims and average size of our customer base. So average claim size is about 140k of eligible spend, which is very similar to HMRC's sort of average numbers as well. But the range of claim sizes that we see is vast. So the biggest claim to go through the platform to date was almost 10 million, 9.6 million of eligible spend. So actually a pretty big claim. But maybe the bit that really raise a smile is at the other end of the scale, where the smallest claims that have come through have been at only £1,000 worth of eligible spend. You might find that strange that somebody will be dealing with claims that small, but I think that's to do with the fact that as an accountant user is working through the system and working with a customer, they might find that a claim is incredibly small, but there's still value to be added to that client, so they're still pushing them through. So that's it in terms of our background. So over to you, Steve. You can just tell us a little bit about Windows and your background in R&D.
Yeah, my background in R&D. So I'm Steve Leonard. I'm a partner at Windows Accountants up in Cumbria. We're a business 60 years old, 2 partners, 20 staff, and like most small accountancy practices, we do a range of things: all the tax, the accounts, audit, etc. And then there's these magical things that we've heard of for years called R&D claims and stuff like that. And we were put off ever doing anything with them because it seemed so remote from what we understood, and we thought it was really, really techy, and it was clouded in mystery. But over the years, we've identified that there's people who should have claims, even if we didn't know what they were. And so therefore, we've used other firms of accountants, we've used other experts and passed them on. And my journey with it was usually one of still not understanding anything more at the end of helping a client go through with a third party, which always frustrated me until I was introduced to Mike 4, 5, 6 years ago, I think, when the concept was there of this idea of empowering us to be able to do something without being that full-on expert, because it was an intuitive piece of software that was going to help. So about 18 months ago, I think we signed up for it, and we've done some claims over the last 18 months. But the other part of my journey is I'm not somebody who's trying to make this into a massive business. I'm not trying to do hundreds of claims. I'm trying to provide my clients who need an answer to these problems, whether they are eligible or not, a way where we can be involved and facilitate that without them being, at worst, ripped off, at best, slightly misled and exposed. So, yeah, so this software does that, which I'm sure Mike will explain a bit more with the demo of how it does that.
Absolutely. And just I mentioned some stats a minute ago in terms of average claims as it's going through the platform. And looking at the work you've done with us today, Steve, you've done 4 claims, I think, in the last 12 months, with an average eligible spend of just over 50k. So quite a bit lower than our average. But actually, what I find interesting about those stats is that you're really representative of, dare I call it, an average client for us. So we've got a lot of firms that we work with that are of your scale, and putting through that kind of number of claims. I mean, is that surprising to you, or what you might expect, knowing what you do?
No, because a lot of people who run businesses like me, as I said, have probably shied away from doing anything. And therefore, I think we're probably naturally more cautious because we haven't immersed ourselves in it for 15 years, and we're not trying to make a fortune out of it on a percentage commission or anything else like that. So therefore, I think the average claim might be lower but to the people who are claiming it, it's still quite significant.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot more people who can use a tool like this to get what might be below average claims, but actually the value still mounts up, because to the ones I've done, one of the particular clients we've done out those claims, I think he's had benefits of about £40,000 over the claims we've done. So it's certainly not insignificant, but I think it also represents my own cautious approach to not pushing it and going, right, is you can claim £50,000 for this, that and the other, and exposing them to the risk.
Yeah, and that's actually a perfect segue into the next slide, Suze, if you just roll us forward. So, you know, the scheme is going through a raft of changes just now. And this slide is kind of deliberately busy. Over on the left-hand side there, we've got the scheme changes that are about to happen from 1st of April. And there's a raft of those. But I think the more important thing is, you mentioned risk there. If we look at the recent behavioural changes from HMRC, where they're dealing with what seems to be a sort of inordinate amount of fraud in the scheme, there's now enhanced scrutiny, so higher inquiry rates than we've ever seen, lots of one-to-many communications, so nudge letters, we refer to those as at the minute. So people are getting kind of concerned about the scheme and nervous about it. I wondered, you know, is that something that you've seen? I think in conversations we've had before, you've certainly seen it in other areas of tax, if not in R&D.
So as you said, we haven't done huge numbers of claims, so I've got no direct R&D inquiry exposure yet, although it may well come, because certainly in the WhatsApp group that you mentioned, I'm seeing lots of other people coming up and asking questions, going, I've had this, what does it mean, etc. Now, from my experience with VAT, income tax and corporation tax, the one that stands out most there is the large-scale one-to-many communications, the nudge letters. These are about trying to influence people's behaviour. So we've seen it a lot where they'll send out a letter to many customers, as they call them, saying, like, have you thought about this? And the language in each of them may be slightly different, even though it's on the same general theme. And their idea is to almost get people to self-assess and admit they've done something wrong if they have, self-assess and admit they've done something wrong even if they haven't but don't really know, or to stop people doing something. So instead of the old days of a Section 9A inquiry notice, as we used to call them, where they open it, they take everything, 6 months later they come back and go, right, you owe us £1,000. They're trying to do it in a much more sophisticated way. And I think with R&D, because a lot of people in my position have been wary of it, if we came across these, we'd be looking at going, right, okay, we'll just shy away from it again. We dipped our toe in. Whereas because I've used the software on the ones, if I got one now, yes, I'd be slightly going, okay, right, what do I do? Because it's your first one. But I also know that I've gone through a process to get me to that point, which I believe in. And the other thing you mentioned is you are not just software. You've got the support behind it. So I know I could pick up the phone or message you or email and go, I've got this, what does it mean? And again, on the WhatsApp, I've seen some of these letters and I've seen the conversations that accountants are having. And it's that peer-to-peer thing, which is even more important than just you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And we ran an article in Accounting Web just a week or two ago on exactly this topic of the one-to-many comms, which I think you've got a link to, Suze, if we can post that up in the chat.
I do have a link, everybody. I'm so sorry. I don't know if Hebe can hear us, but I don't have access to the chat box, I'm afraid, just because it's not our Zoom. So
yeah, I can hear you. Let me see if I can help with this.
Real. Oh,
if I can, no problem. Yeah. Up in a minute.
Sure. How do you know how I can do this?
If I post it in the chat box to you directly, then I think maybe you can copy and paste it and share to everybody else in the audience.
Yeah.
That'll work. See what you can do.
Mike, we'll work this out
in the background. Yeah, absolutely. Well, if we can, if we can't, we'll do it as a share in the follow-up emails anyway. I mean, the other thing that's going on at the minute is the House of Lords have run an inquiry into the changes that are on the left-hand side of that screen, and come back with sort of recommendations. One of which, many of which relate to HMRC's policing of the scheme, and that actually although HMRC are kind of rushing to make changes that they're saying are around protecting the scheme from fraud, the House of Lords feedback is actually there needs to be more policing of the scheme. So in reality, I think we're going to see more of this kind of communication over time. I suspect it'll settle down, but in terms of, you know, where the scheme was a year or two ago with very, very low inquiry rates, I don't think we'll go back to that. I think perhaps politically driven, we'll be seeing more and more of this. And you know, back to your point, Steve, about dealing with risk, I guess it's down to being confident in doing the right job in the first place is the key thing here, so that if you're exposed to an inquiry, you know that the data you've got and the work that you've done with the client is of sufficient quality.
Yeah, and it's no different than everything else we do, corporation tax, accounts, income tax. We're confident in that because we're used to doing this. This is something new to us and probably many other practitioners, the R&D. So therefore, if I was just winging it, so to speak, with no sort of support or anything else like that, I'd be looking at going, right, okay, it's too big a risk, because, you know, I've seen what happens when these type of things go wrong in other areas. So the fact that they're bringing in all this stuff, I actually agree with, because especially during COVID, it was like the Wild West. Every man and his dog set up a firm saying they could get you free money, and the government were just paying out because it was almost benefits via the tax system. So I understand why they're bringing this in. I mean, the big one for me is on the left-hand side is probably the pre-notification, because too many times I've had clients from going, I've had a phone call from XYZ Limited, they can get me £70,000 back, and all I've got to do is do this, but I've got to do it in the next month because of the time limits. And they go back and they do 2 years claim and they end up with some money. The pre-notification, I don't know the exact details of how it works, but when that comes in, it will stop a lot of that ambulance chasing type thing where it's just like make something up.
Yeah, and that's exactly that's, you know, exactly the basis of HMRC making that change, is to try and put gateways in place that stop that kind of behaviour.
And I'm sure you've seen it much more, that a lot of those firms who were claiming to be experts 2 years ago now don't exist because they've had all the money and run, and all the problems have been left behind. So that's why I wouldn't be doing this unless I had that support structure behind me, knowing that, I guess the best way to look at it is if I end up with a inquiry on one of mine, it will be because I've misunderstood something, not because I've made something up.
Yes, not because you've deliberately set out to
yeah, because the process the software takes you through means that it eliminates a lot of the risk of not knowing.
Yeah, brilliant. Suze, back over to you for the demo. We'll jump into that now, so we can have a look at the product itself.
That's perfect. And just I can post links now, everyone. Hebe, thank you, Hebe. She posted the nudge letter one. I think we had a House of Lords one to come in, so I'll just
yeah, if you can do that later on, Suze, once you pass that
one's there. So
yeah,
I just need to have a little switch of screens for everybody there. So let me just do that. Oh, sorry, that's the screen. Technology is not my friend today, as everybody who is on this call knows. Okay, we're into the app now. That's perfect. Sorry, I've moved the slides forward a bit, but that's okay. We can worry about those in just a moment. So the aim of what I'm about to do is just to really give you a bit of an insight into the app. I think the key thing for this session is really to get lots of discussion between Mike and Steve about experiences and things that are going on. So I will do this at a relatively high level and just really take some time to show you the process, and I'll dip in and out the dashboards and show you the risk mitigation factors, and then we'll have a quick look at the report at the end as well. I suppose the first thing to say before anything else is that there is absolutely no doubt that a user of our software needs to have a basic level of understanding of HMRC's guidance and what actually constitutes eligibility. Hence why you've been already hearing about how we've developed our software to be only placed in the hands of accountants and specialist consultants and not the claimant themselves. WhisperClaims has been designed to take you through this very structured and repeatable process to ensure that all of the right questions have been asked and to guide your conversations with your clients so that you can coach them through the process, through the scheme, and ensure that all of the corners of the scheme have been poked into, with the outcome essentially being a clear and concise report that demonstrates why your client's claim is eligible for relief. So when you first come into the system, this is your main homepage dash, which is essentially your gateway into the rest of the system. Steve already has given us a great roundup of the support that we provide in conjunction with the app. And I think that the really main thing that I want to touch on about that is you can access our support from anywhere you are within the system. So this question mark icon in the top right hand of the hand side of the screen there is giving you us our telephone number and also access to email us directly. And you also have a live chat function if you want to get hold of us really, really quickly, where you can directly message Jen and Ian in the background. We are a very small team. We handle everything internally, so it's always Jen and Ian that you're going to be speaking to. On the odd occasion, it might be me or Mike, but generally speaking, it's generated. They are our R&D tax experts here in the background to help you with any scheme or eligibility related queries. Just really, really quickly, just to give you a quick spin around some of the dashboards. This is where you create your clients. So in time, this is where your clients, you're going to see all your clients stacking up here in the library. This is where you can view and create all of the claims that you're going to be preparing with your clients. So you've got these color-coded progress bars down the center of the screen that are showing you how far along you are in the process. You can dip in and out as many times as you need to until you feel you're ready to finalize and download your reports. Anything that's green is showing you that a claim is complete. So all of your reports sit here in the dashboard as well, ready for you to download. And we give you your reports in a PDF and a Word version too, just to help you be able to customize your reports should you need to. And things like, we always get asked, what happens if I download my report and I notice there's an error or I need to go back in to change something? You can come into your dashboard and request for a claim to be unlocked, which means it will unlock the question set for you. You can go back in, make whatever amendments or edits that you need to, and then regenerate a new version of the report based on your edits. Okay, so just spinning into the system here. I've just realised that, sorry, Mike, can I be really annoying and just ask you to fill for just a minute? Because I've just realised that my claim is not unlocked and I need to go back in and do that so that I can show everybody the most up-to-date features within the system. I'm really sorry about that. Yeah,
don't worry, Sue. We just had a question actually, which I've just kind of dealt with in the background, but I'll just talk briefly about it. So we were asked if there were if HMRC seemed to be going back with looking at these sort of upcoming changes and measuring historic claims against them. I've just made the point in the Q&A box there that these recent comms, all of the nudge letters that have gone out, which there's been about 6,000 or more in the last few months, they seem to be triggered by new claims, so they don't seem to be going backwards. There's nothing to stop them going back to historic claims, but right now it's things like claims that are in SIC codes that are unusual. It's first-time claimants. In February, I think 2,000 letters went out to previous claimants with kind of no particular trigger. It was just 2,000 claims had gone in that month and they all seem to get a letter. So the triggers for these letters and inquiries seem to be fairly high level, but they do all seem to be against, if you like, relatively new claims. That was an anonymous question, so I'm not sure who sent that in, but hopefully that answers the question for you. And is that similar, Steve, for, you mentioned other areas of tax that you've had experience of this in?
Yeah.
Is that the same kind of thing?
Yeah, there will be a targeted approach, even if we don't know what it is. HMRC will have picked a set of parameters to do it, and they'll set a computer running and go, pick all these, send them a letter, or this type of letter. So I mean, the last big one I saw was to do with minimum wage, and it was the same sort of thing. They sent letters out almost implying you'd done something wrong, but you hadn't. I mean, we as a firm got one ourselves, which was an interesting conversation when I phoned up and said, do you understand what the minimum wage is? And I explained in full detail. So it's not as if the random, but there will be certain parameters that are picked. New claimants is probably the obvious one, and I think you also mentioned to do with SIC codes at Companies House, which for years and years nobody's really cared about SIC codes at Companies House, but I guess it highlights the value that data, or correct data, has now, because I've seen other things to do with SIC codes at Companies House that banks don't like and other things. So just picking something was fine in the past. Now it shows that there's this linked, joined up thinking
Yeah.
to make sure. So it's one of those that even something as simple as checking that before you do a claim and checking with you guys, because I spoke to Ian about things and he said, oh, send us a list of some companies and the SIT codes to see whether they will be in the sectors we would expect. Now, it doesn't stop them doing it, and it could be that you've got a historical or incorrect code, but it might just flag up at HMRC's end that you're a higher risk because you shouldn't have it. If your SIT code says you're, for example, a hairdresser, the chances are that's going to be low down on the list of people who should be claiming. If you just happen to put the wrong one in and you're actually a scientific engineering company, you could be prejudiced by it. So it does show that HMRC have access to a heck of a lot of data, and they've got some very clever people working on how to use it.
Yeah, absolutely. And funnily enough, we'll come back to you now, Susan, who you set up. But I was in a chat yesterday with a customer of ours who, for precisely the reason we're talking about, had encouraged the client to change their SIC code on his house before a claim went in, but for that exact reason, knowing that that was acting as a trigger. Sorry, Suze, back to you. I know you've got yourself sorted.
I'm really sorry for that interruption, everybody. So back into the demo very quickly. So I've mentioned support. So as has already been reiterated, Jen and Ian are here in the background. Get hold of them wherever you are in the app. We've just come into what is a dummy claim, and I just want to quickly show you around the structure of the pages that you're going to work through as you go through the process, and then bounce through the process, and then, as I said, show you what a report will look like at the end. So on your left hand side, you've got your progress/navigation bar. So these are all of the sections that you're going to work through as you prepare a claim with your clients. Okay, the question set is dynamic. So what that means for you is as you're moving through the question sets, the system in the background is constantly flexing to two main things really. It's doing, it's trying to assess the status of the claim, so whether it's SME or RDEC, or in some cases a bit of both. And we also have several eligibility checkers built into the system to help you ensure that you are only preparing claims that meet the criteria. So you will be stopped in your tracks should there be a reason why the system is deemed the way that you've answered a question means that the claim is ineligible. When you go through the system, get to the end and the computer says no, to help you screen out ineligible clients as quickly as possible. Every single page starts with a question or a statement, and the way that you answer those questions or statements. In the example we've got here, we've got buttons. You're going to see sliders, drop downs, multiple choice questions, and free text areas too. Every single page has its own in-app help and support. So if I just click on this link, you're going to see we've got some notes, a short video, and links that take you directly to the guidance on HMRC's website, which is bespoke to every single question. Every single question also has dynamic feedback, which is simply based on a red, amber, green protocol. Green is good, everything's fine, let's move forward. Amber is there to serve a couple of purposes, sometimes to give you instructions, sometimes to let you know that the way that you've answered a question has weakened the claim, and sometimes to let you know that the way that you've answered the question means that the system needs more information to make its assessments for spend being routed in the background. So you will be exposed to some additional questions that you wouldn't ordinarily see. And as you can imagine, red means that the claim is likely to be ineligible. And as you can imagine, our advice would always be, if you hit one of these red endpoints, we strongly suggest you abandon the claim. So that's the structure. The very first part of the process is your initial qualification check. So I'm just going to start just so you get a feel for the types of things that we're asking here. This first part of this is to ensure that your client meets the very minimum criteria to be able to move forward. Once you get into the company section, as you can imagine, we're just starting to gather information about the company, number of staff, that sort of thing. If, for example, I just increase the number of staff over the threshold to be able to claim SME here, you're going to see that feedback at the bottom of the page update to amber, indicating that we're now looking at an RDEC claim. Fundamentally, the way that we're going to work through the system is exactly the same. The questions will flex again in the background to ask specific things that are relevant, and you'll see that happen as we go through. Another thing that you can do once you get to this part of the system, if you want to, is invite collaborators onto the claim. This is your MDs, your FDs, your CTOs, your project managers, project leads, anybody who needs to be able to have input into the claim. Collaborators do have a restricted view of the question set. You can do things like turn off access to the cost questions. So less senior members of the team, for example, don't see things like sensitive salary information, but it can be a really handy way to enable the process to be able to move forward if you're struggling to get your client to give you information. Having them on the claim with you can really help the process. So again, let me just start moving through the questions. So through the company section, we ask about things like group structures and shareholdings, because again, these things can affect the way the spend is routed in the background. So again, you're going to see the feedback change. Okay, so let's get to the project section now. So this is the part of the process where we're going to walk you through essentially to understand where eligibility lies, prompting conversation between you and your client to really get under the hood and work out what's going on and gather all of the data that you need essentially for the report narrative. The first thing we ask about in the project section is to do with commercial drivers. This really is for the purposes of the report to demonstrate to HMRC that we understand the difference between what is a commercial driver and what technically qualifies for relief. So again, it's a discussion with your client, working through the options, identifying what fits best with the work that your client's doing. We then, of course, need to understand the type of R&D that your client is active in. So this is all around a bit of the legislation that anybody who's already doing claims will be very familiar with, CRID 81900. So for this next part of the process, we have a set of sliders, and we will want to understand and identify what type of R&D the client is doing. And the reason why there's a slider is because we want to try and assess intensity. The way that we answer these next 4 questions is going to manifest itself as a graph at the end of the process, and we'll see that in just a moment. So once we've identified the type of R&D our client's doing, let's have a look at this next question here for competent professionals. It's really, really key and important that we identify who the competent professionals are. These are the people that are directing the technical problem solving, and these are the people that are finding something hard. And also, should there be any questions raised by the revenue about a claim, these are the people that HMRC are going to want to speak to. So once we've determined the type of R&D, we've got our look at technical challenges now. So what's these competent professional drivers section? We have a set of categories and options that you can choose from. You can straddle these categories, and depending on the type of work that the client is doing, you can identify a series of options here. Again, that will be turned into narrative at the end of the process in the report. Okay, so we've identified the challenges. Let's have a look now at things like outputs. So a key thing as part of the process between you and your client that you want to do is ensure that your clients are keeping good records as they move through the financial period, but also archiving these records should there be any questions or queries raised from the revenue at a later date. So we're not asking you to provide any of this information upfront or even for the report. We're just getting you to make sure that this is being done, and there is just a small paragraph just stating that should there be any questions or queries raised, this claimant has this and this available as evidence. Grants are a complexity of the scheme, and we handle those as well, demonstrating to HMRC that we understand that they can impact a claim and making sure that we're proving that we've done our due diligence. So again, things like the first question here is, what was the total amount of grants and subsidies received over the period? Obviously, that should match the accounts. And then we're going to ask, okay, so how much of those grants and subsidies were used against the R&D? Now, if that was a 0, you would put a 0 in that box and the system would allow you to move on. However, if grants were received, we need to understand what impact they have. So you're essentially taken through a series of filters and gateways to identify that information. And in the background, the system will do all the routing of spend for you. The final bit is of the project section is the technical detail section. So this is the bit where we want to really give HMRC some insights into the projects that the client has been doing and give some examples of the work. This used to be just a plain blank time. We really evolved this section to ensure that really guiding our customers to make sure that they are including information that HMRC needs to know without including information that is potentially could be considered as prejudicial or basically incite HMRC to have to feel like they need to ask questions. So very straightforward templates, project title, technical lead name, the area of science and technology is pulled from here, so that's a little drop down, the time span within the financial period that this technical problem solving was happening, and then there's 4 key sections that we ask you to apply information to. So what was the industry baseline? What were the advances being sought? What were the uncertainties that the client encountered? And then what were the resolutions attempted? Now, you can also attach an image and an image description should you want to or should you need to, and you can include as many projects as you want to. Just by clicking on this blue cross here, you will expose yourself to a fresh template. HMRC's guidance has generally always been you should be considering including up to 50% of the client's qualifying spends as projects. So thinking about what projects are being included and earmarking those most highly financially valuable ones as the ones that you want to include. Obviously, if you think the claim is high risk or likely to be inquired into, you may want to include even more information just to make sure that you can give HMRC a really clear understanding of what's going on. Mike, you've had some recent discussions, haven't you, in the background about interesting processes that are going on in HMRC, or anecdotal, but interesting.
Yeah, well, in a way, relating to the points that Steve and I were discussing a minute ago on the reasons why you might get nudge letters. So the bit of anecdotal evidence is that because of the time pressure that inspectors are under right now, they're limited to half an hour to read through and assess a report. And that includes writing a brief report on the claim. So 25 minutes to read it and assess it, 5 minutes to do a quick report. So if they're looking at a report and it just before they've even read it, it looks like it's going to take longer than that to assess it, then it gets assessed as medium risk and a nudge letter gets sent out. So, we've seen a lot of people getting frustrated by I'm getting a nudge letter, it's asking me for all this information, it was already in the report. The driver for that seems to be simply that the report was long, the HMRC haven't got the time to read it. And I know that's incredibly frustrating, but I guess you kind of flip that around, it's a reason to keep the reports nice and succinct and to the point in the first place, and make sure that you're not kind of breaking through a sort of a hurdle point, as we were talking about a minute ago, Steve.
Yeah. So yes, it's interesting because when I first did my claims on this, I think I don't know who I spoke to, but they said keep the details brief, because then the person at the other end who might be looking at it isn't wanting to know exactly what you've done. They want to know whether you understand what you've done and whether it fits into those broad brush areas of, is it an advance and technological advance, etc., etc. So putting in pages and pages doesn't necessarily enhance the report, although it's counterintuitive, really. But on the flip side, putting nothing in, which you were able, I might still be able to do until the rule changes, putting nothing in was a bad idea. But probably a lot over the last couple of years have just gone through with absolutely no justification whatsoever a report. And that might be why they're looking back at some of those going, do you want to reassess and ask some questions? So it's getting a balance between the two. What I found when I've been doing these bits is it's very important that the claimant puts into their words what you've done rather than you putting words into their mouth, because they fully understand the terminology and everything. And as pointed out, they've got to explain it. I can go, right, well, that's a widget, it looks great, I can do the financial bit, but what did you actually achieve? And you're relying on those, which is, I know you've just flown through it very quickly. All the claims I've done, I have sat there and gone through all of this stuff with the client sat next to me. I'm not just doing a claim and saying, right, you tell me what you think, we'll make something up. Because the questions, and I know you've flown through them, the questions, when you actually sit there with somebody who is technical and has done it, they're going, what does that mean? And it makes them think. And what I've said to them each time is just answer the question the way you think is right, not necessarily the way you think you have to get a claim. And I think that's...
recognizing that they are, Sue's talked about the concept earlier on of competent professionals, and what an important component of this is. They are the competent professionals, so get them to answer the question. Right.
And it's quite illuminating when you sit there with somebody who is a competent professional, answering some of the questions that are there as the prompts, and getting into it a bit, going, well, what does that really mean? But that's what you want, because otherwise you go, yes, we've done some of this stuff, here's a claim, and it goes through, which is not, it's just wrong. It's not what I want to be doing. But it makes them think about the process. And it also means that when you get to the end of it, they understand why there's a claim, or more importantly, on one that I looked at, which we never went ahead with, they understand why there isn't a claim.
Yeah, which is all about making, building your reputation with the client at the end of the day, which is exactly what we're trying to do. So, sorry, Suze, we took you off at a tangent. Keep going.
And just picking up on what Steve said there, if you're not lucky enough to be able to sit next to your clients because you're too far away, that's the great thing about the collaboration feature, is that you can bring your clients in, and that particular part of the system is obviously a really key part, that if you need to get your collaborators to help with you. The next bit really is, we've identified where eligibility lies, so we can now work out all the costs that we need to associate to that work. So very, very quickly, there's several ways that you can collect staff costs. So you can either do it globally or using an individual cost capture, and you've got a CSV upload function here as well. And then it's just a case of going through all of the relevant spend, so employment allowance, reimbursed R&D expenses if there were any, and then all of the costs that are eligible to be claimed for, like software, clinical trials, raw materials, heat and lights. And then we've got the EPWs and subcontractors as well. Last bit is to do a review. So I'll just take you into the, if we go and review, you're then brought into essentially our claim summary review area. So on your left-hand side, you've got an output of all of the numerical data that's been collected over the claim, giving you a chance to kind of stop and take a breath and make sure that everything makes sense before you move forward. And then on the right-hand side, I've got something that I've purposely made look horrible so that we can have a bit of a chat about this and explain in a bit more detail the purpose of our in-app claim risk assessments. So this is a part at the end of the process, which is essentially looking at all of the information and benchmarking the details in this claim against similar looking claims and giving it an overall assessment, whether it's low, medium or high. This claim is considered high risk for several reasons. So what the system is looking at are things like what Steve is this company in an area HMRC would consider eligible for relief? Looking at things like, does the size of the claim versus the company turnover look okay? Are there grants present? Are there shareholders and group structures? That sort of thing. Below that, I suppose what's really important to say is that this isn't a measure of eligibility and certainly shouldn't stop you in your tracks. This is here just to kind of help you make sure that you've dotted all your I's and crossed your T's, making sure that if there are any potential weaknesses, you've been able to go back and ensure that you've got a robust defence for any questions that HMRC may have. Below that, you've got your approximate qualifying spend. In this example, we've got spend going through both schemes, and you'll notice the figures are quite rounded. They are rounded down ever so slightly. This is just here to help you essentially do a quick and rough run through to identify what your client's benefit might look like, and that will inform other conversations you may want to have about whether your client wants to move forward. You may not have discussed commercial terms yet, that sort of thing. So now you've got a better understanding of what the claim is going to look like. You can have those conversations. Below that, you've got the fee that you're going to pay for this report. We'll be discussing that in just a moment. And then the finalised claim button. So this is the wow moment. This is the bit where you can sit back and let the system do all of the hard work for you. The system's going to baseline the figures and write the narrative for us. And it just takes a couple of seconds, so long as my Wi-Fi holds out. Oh, there we go. That's it. Very good. And then we can now download our reports. Before we download the report, you do have the opportunity, should you want to engage with our WhisperClaims claim review service. Unlike the automated risk review on the previous page there, this is an optional layer of reassurance should you feel you need it. So it's a deep dive desk-based review done by Jen and Ian in the background here, our R&D tax experts who sit and support. They will do an assessment of the claim. They'll review all of the publicly available information about the company. They will assess the technical descriptions for eligibility. They will analyse the costs and essentially provide you with a PDF report of essentially how the claim hangs together, giving you hints, tips, advice as to how the claim could be improved even further, made more robust, that sort of thing. Okay, so when we're ready to download the reports, we just click download now. And we're going to see, you might remember from the dashboards and a Word version of the reports. If I just pull up the PDF here, I'll just quickly give you a spin through what the reports look like, and then I'll hand back to Mike and Steve for the last bit of the session. So you can see your logo would go here. You've just got a nice cover page, a contents page. And then what you'll hopefully see, although I did fly through everything quite quickly, is all of the questions using sliders, drop downs, free text boxes, buttons, all the different ways that we've been asking you to collect your client data has now been turned into essentially this very clearly paragraphed headlined narrative that is explaining to HMRC why this client's claim is eligible for relief and demonstrating to them, as we've already said, that all of the right questions have been asked. Once we get through the narrative section, you're going to then see the costs, which is just coming up on the next page here. So we lay out all of the spend for you in really clear tables. And then on the next page, you're going to see the raw eligible spend, which is just here, which are the figures that you need to put into the return. There's just some notes and assumptions based on the figures on this next page. And then there's two potential appendix. The first one being the technical description section, which is going through each of the projects that you've decided to highlight to HMRC between you and your clients as the ones that you want them to have a look at. And then finally, for this client, we had a cost capture for the detailed staff cost, which is here, which is just a breakdown of all of the internal staff information, which is obviously part of the process too. So I'm really sorry, Mike, I did skip through a couple of these slides earlier on, so let's get you back a bit. Oops.
There you go. That's the one. Brilliant. Thanks, Sue. Good stuff. So this is most of the points on this slide are kind of deliberately grayed out. This is just an idea of the technical features that we're working on in the background right now that deal with all of the changes that HMRC are bringing in from 1st of April. And I just highlighted a couple there on the right-hand side. So one of the requirements from HMRC now is in their portal, you'll need to answer a bunch of questions that are essentially taking an output from within a report. So they're asking for a report and specific answers to these questions. Now, unfortunately, the portal doesn't have any open APIs, so we can't automate the completion of the form. But what we can do is find quick and easy ways of presenting you with the data that enable you to fill those forms out really easily. So we're working on that right now, and that'll be in place soon into the new financial year. Another one I've highlighted is there's a question now from HMRC where they'll be essentially pointing out how many specific project descriptions they need based on the overall size and complexity of the claim. So we'll be automating that. So again, that'll be really easy for you to see how many project descriptions you need to include, given the nature of the claim that you've put in. So really, the purpose of me putting this slide up was to just make the point that one of the things in working with us is that we're always ahead of the changes that HMRC are making. So you shouldn't need to worry about any future changes to the scheme. Now, the scheme's been relatively stable, Steve, while you've been working with us, but I guess in sort of embodied in what you said earlier about why you came to us, which was mitigating risk, making sure you're doing a good job in front of your clients. This is one of the things that's important to you, that we're keeping on top of this stuff on your behalf.
Yeah, it's as similar to other software we use. What we don't want to be doing is telling somebody it doesn't work. We want to be told it does work and not have to worry about these sort of technical things. Yes, we need to understand the legislation, but the administration of the legislation is the pain point for us, you know. So therefore, if we know that all those things there are going to be sorted by you and pre-populated or made as easy as possible, then it makes our job easier and we can concentrate on actually sitting with the clients and doing the work. It's like I said, it's having those sort of friendly experts in the background who aren't trying to take over what you're doing, but are there to support you in many different ways when you need it. But it's not that full on battering you with everything, or the other option, which I've had before, which is sort of, yes, we'll help you do something and then abandon you afterwards.
Yeah.
So yeah, and like I said, the WhatsApp group for me is interesting, although I only post bits of it, and there's some very, very clever people who do lots of them, very technical stuff. It's fascinating to watch the interactions, and you're learning so much in a very simple way without having to look at a 20-page document. Your peers and your support team are sorting it all out for you, and you pick up one and go, all right, okay. So it's actually very good for CPD, although it's not technically meant to be for that. It's quite helpful.
Yeah, but in terms of, if you like, real learning and you know, going back to what I said earlier on, the idea here is to increase your level of confidence, and all of that is doing exactly that, isn't it? Brilliant. Thanks, Suze. Next slide. So again, a great segue given what you've just said, actually, Steve. So I wanted to talk about pricing, but I guess more importantly, what you get for the price as well. So our core pricing is based on a £100 a month subscription fee, which gives you access to the system and all of our support. And then we charge a download fee on each report, which is capped at £600. It's actually based on 2% of the eligible spend running through both the RDEC and SME elements of the scheme up to that cap. For higher volume customers, so we do have a few people who are putting through really high volumes of claims. We do have an enterprise pricing scheme that's based on us essentially charging a fixed monthly fee based on a forecast around your usage of the system. So we have a number of people who work with us in that way. And if you feel that that's the kind of category you're likely to fall into, kind of feel free to get in touch and have that conversation with us. But what do you get for the money? So in terms of the kind of hands-on support, some of this we've mentioned already. We've got the advice line, so direct access to our team of experts when you need it, either through the app or literally at the end of a phone call. We've got the automated risk review that you've seen in Suze's demo there. Claim review service, again, you saw the button for that in the app. So if you need somebody to go through a detailed review of the claim, we can do that for you. WhatsApp group, Steve, you mentioned they're really important aspects of the support we provide. And we've also got our inquiry support service that's recently been launched. So where you're seeing nudge letters, you're seeing inquiry letters, again, the team can give you specific support around how to deal with a particular letter. So what your detailed response should be, reviewing that response for you before it goes in. It is a paid for service in that case, and it's not a full inquiry defense service, but it is like the claim review. It's kind of help give you confidence that the correspondence you're putting together for HMRC is appropriate. So next slide, I think, Suze.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So there's probably two key groups of customers that tend to come along to us. One is people that are preparing claims already. So they're coming to us because they're looking for an improvement in efficiency. They may be looking for that extra shoulder to lean on, particularly at the moment, to have somebody to give them additional help and support when they're dealing with HMRC. The other group of people who may be launching for the first time, perhaps they've been outsourcing, or maybe they've even been ignoring the opportunity altogether, but they want to launch a new service line. So they tend to be people who are looking for that kind of deeper relationship with us and properly leaning on our support. And that's really you, isn't it, Steve? That was the category that you were in when you came to us.
Yeah. I tried all the other options, other accountants, third-party sources, ignoring it. And it just got to the point where, I was trying to find a solution, but looking in the wrong places. And then obviously this allows me to be involved in it, in control of it, but not on my own. Because what I have found with everybody else I've used in the past, nobody wanted to actually involve me in the process. What they wanted to do was take it away, and then at best you'd see the report, so can you just attach that to a corporation tax return, which for all sorts of reasons is not necessarily great, but we did it. But I learned nothing from it, so therefore I still couldn't identify any more clients who may or may not be eligible. So what this allowed us to do once we took this step is to say, right, okay, we know enough to do certain things, but also with the thing in the back of our mind that because you've got that community feel along with the other people in it, if there's something I come across that I don't know, I can ask. If there's something I come across which feels as though it's too big for me or too expert for me, rather than try and learn it all or pass it on to a random person, I could reach out to the people who you deal with and say, right, okay, could one of you do this? Not for any reward from me, just to make sure my client is looked after, because ultimately it's all about making sure the clients are looked after and get the best value, but also are protected. Yes. Because I've seen a lot of people in other areas, not mine, who I think have been ripped off and misled and potentially could end up in trouble. And I didn't want that, and I didn't want to be part of that. But by not being part of it, you sort of also exposing them to the the rogues that are out there. So this gives me the ability to be involved, advise either way, but also have a backup to it, which is quite important.
Yeah, I suppose you're staying in control of the relationship with the clients in the end, aren't you? Excellent. Yeah, great. Suze, over to you to just quickly talk through the trial.
Yeah, so we did just have a question while we were talking about do we ask for a commitment? So if you become a WhisperClaims customer, we do ask for a 12-month commitment from you. However, we onboard everybody into an initial 30-day subscription-free trial. Within those 30 days, as the name suggests, you do not have to pay your first month's subscription. You also get one free report download, which is obviously worth up to £600, and you get to have that first report reviewed by Jen and Ian. So that is the service. It is usually costs £100 plus VAT. You also get unlimited access to our advice line support within that time. So really what we're giving the opportunity to do is stress the statistics. Engage with the way that works and the output. Have you lost me?
Yeah, sorry, Susie, we lost you for a second, but you've come back. Keep going.
I'm so sorry. I'm not sure what you heard, but just letting everyone know that within the trial, you've got the opportunity to stress test the system, produce a live claim. You can obviously charge your client for that piece of work, but you're getting it for free from us. The idea being that we're hopefully going to help you kind of launch yourself into using the app long term, and again committing to that 12-month sub. The one thing that I think Michael probably agree with as well is just remember that you may not have claims every single month, because you may have parts of the year where you've got heavy loads of claims, year ends, that sort of thing, and other parts of the year where you're a bit quieter. But as Steve's talked about, within those periods, you've always got the opportunity to engage with Jen and Ian in support, and also start preparing your claims in advance within the app as well. If anybody does want to kick off a trial, you just need to let us know. I'll pop a little note in the chat in just a moment now with my details, and also a meeting link for anybody who'd like a more in-depth demo, because I am aware we did run through that very, very quickly. That's the details just gone in there as well. And that might be Michael or myself who will be on those calls with you. I think that's it from me. Just over to questions. We don't have any just now. We've obviously been tackling questions as we've gone through, but if anybody, well, actually, there is one in the chat, is there?
Yeah, there's one from Haroon. So it's just regarding the question, do we need to go through step by step from the software, or is there a template which you can use to send it to the client as a form to complete, and then we use to input onto the software? Steve, it was interesting, you mentioned earlier on that you're using it, you literally sit with every client to work through the process. And we have, I'd say probably the majority of our customers do it that way, whether that's actually physically sat with them or over a Zoom call. I think that's really down to what we said before about building a relationship with the client, that you're partly using it for that, Steve, as well as working through.
Definitely, it's the opportunity to sit with them and actually have a conversation, rather than just say send a question. I mean, the question that's asked is interesting because I saw it, and I would actually think that I don't know if there is a template to do it, but in a way, I actually think that would defeat part of the good parts of the software, because it doesn't take that long when you go through it, but it means that you're going through and it's intuitively asking a question, you're filling some details in, and it makes sure that you don't go down the wrong path or waste too much time doing it. So actually, for the small amount of time it takes to go through those what seem like basic, boring questions, there's actually a logic to it. Because when I first did mine, you put things in glibly thinking it's okay, and then you realize you've actually put something in wrong. But that review bit when it says a red flag, green or whatever. So I would say, even if there was a template there, I wouldn't be using it. I'd be sitting there doing each one. What you can do is, once you've done one claim for a client, it is possible to take some of the basic data and roll it forward, isn't it, to a future claim.
Yeah, you can replicate the previous claim to give you a starting point.
But certainly, I would say trying to shortcut some of the questions in the software would actually defeat the purpose of having the software. And from my point of view, I'd prefer to just go through each and every individual one, because it doesn't take that long. And What we do now is some of the basic stuff that isn't really needing the conversation. We fill in before, and we've got all the finances because we've done the accounts. So you can shortcut some of them, but I would go through as it's designed, especially if it's your first few you're doing with it, because it really does get you the feel of what you're trying to achieve through the whole process.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And also, where we have seen people try to do this, we don't have a template, by the way, but where we've seen people try to do this, what you end up with is almost a doubling the effort. So you're asking the client to input all that data first, and you're still going to have a conversation with them. So it's actually far better to just focus on the process, use the software, as you said, Steve, to work through the process. And actually, that's your kind of quickest route to success, if you like.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Sue.
Yeah, thanks, Haroon. We don't have any other questions, so I think that might be it for the day. So really appreciate everyone who's joined today. Thank you for being here, and thank you so much, Steve, and to XU as well, for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you to our panelists, Mike, Susan, Steve. You're all great. I did say at the beginning, but everyone's going to be sent a recording of this webinar. And yeah, I think that's it from everyone. So stay warm, stay dry, and see you soon.
Brilliant. Thanks, Amy. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.